Taj Dilek, welcome to Tibettv program on Tibet support groups. In today's edition of Introducing Tibet Support Groups, we will discuss on International Campaign for Tibet, Brussels. International Campaign for Tibet's office in Brussels was set up in September 2006. It carries out targeted advocacy activities ahead of bilateral EU-China meetings, such as the EU-China Summit or the EU-China Human Rights Dialogue. To discuss in depth about the workings of International Campaign for Tibet, Brussels, I'm joined by Mr. Vincent Metten, who is a EU Policy Director of International Campaign for Tibet, Brussels. Welcome to Tibettv, sir.
Thank you for inviting me.
Sir, International Campaign for Tibet, Brussels was set up in 2006 with aim of interacting with the European institutions to raise awareness on the situations of Tibetans in Tibet as well as in exile. So, sir, can you tell our audience how does your organization work on it and the formation of your organization in Belgium?
Sure. It's indeed an office that was set up in 2006. It was a decision taken to have a permanent office in Brussels, in the European capital, in addition to the office we have in Berlin and in Amsterdam. ICT Brussels is a branch of ICT Europe in Amsterdam. So the main reason why we were set up is to indeed, as you explained, influence EU policy on Tibet and make sure that Tibet is, well discussed and on the agenda of our European leaders when it comes to relation with China. In addition to EU issues, we also have the responsibility of a few European countries, French-speaking countries, France, Belgium, Luxembourg, and Switzerland. And we are also working here very closely with the Office of Tibet in Brussels and with also several NGOs that are based here in Brussels, like the International Federation for Human Rights, Amnesty International, World Uyghur Congress, UNPO, and so on. This is a group that we formed an alliance, a coalition with NGOs to try to have more weight and to have our voice heard by EU institutions. So we sometimes organize joint protests, joint demonstration. If there is an EU-China summit in Brussels at Schuman, we will ask other NGOs if they would like to join together with Uyghur community and with the Tibetan community, because we have the chance to have several thousands Tibetans living in Belgium, either mostly in Brussels or in Antwerpen. And this is also a force for us. And we, try to help them as much as we can. So when there is a request from the Tibetan community to have an event or a demonstration or a campaign, we, mobilize our efforts and our assets to fulfill their goal. So we are really feeling to be at the disposal, at the service of Tibetans here in Belgium. Then in terms of advocacy work, we work as other offices. We, collect information on the ground by our research team. We process this information, we check it, and then we diffuse it to our networks in different countries and institutions, including at the UN level.
Sir, my next question is, how many resolutions are passed in European Parliament on Tibet so far? So, sir, can you specify some of the important resolutions and their impacts on Tibetan issue?
Certainly. So the European Parliament is certainly the most vocal body in the EU institution, where you have several bodies, a complex landscape, I would say. And the Parliament is the most outspoken when it comes to human rights issues. So it has different ways to express its opinion, including by adopting urgency resolution. And since 2000, the year 2000, we counted 37 resolutions that have been adopted either globally on human rights in China, mentioning Tibet, or specifically on Tibet. So not only on Tibet, but a mix of both. All of them are available on our website. If you want to check, you can go on safetibet.eu, and they are all listed there. Let me give you some examples of this resolution. In 2019, April, there was one resolution on the situation of religious and ethnic minorities in China, for instance, that was passed. In 2018, January, there was one on some human rights activists, including Tashi Wanchuk was there, and the Tibetan monk Chuki. 2016, there was one resolution on the Buddhist Institute of Larungar. In 2012, there was one on the human rights situation in Tibet. 1 year before, there was 2 resolutions on Tibet on self-immolation and on the ban of Tibetan election in exile in Nepal. 2010, there was one resolution on Tibetan language in the education. And in 2008, there was one resolution of the uprising of Tibetan Plateau and on the dialogue process between the envoys of His Holiness and the government of China. I just would like to say that the European Parliament resolution are important because they express a position. It's not binding. It's an opinion, but it sends a message towards other EU institutions with recommendations and towards Beijing. And we know Beijing does, and the Chinese leader do not like this kind of resolution because it shows in a visible way their misbehavior, how they mistreat Tibetans, how they violate human rights in different fields. So they try to block this resolution to be adopted, and they pressure the European members of the European Parliament sometimes, in a very intensive way. But in general, it's counterproductive, and the parliamentarians do not like that. There are other, and just let me finish by saying that there is also the European External Action Service in Brussels who does good job. They are in the forefront of the dialogue process on human rights with China, and they are really trying to put Tibet, to voice their concerns, to give cases of Tibetan prisoners. And even if the dialogue does not produce satisfactory results and outcomes, it is still a channel of communication that the EU is using to express its position.
Sir, as you said that your organization works on EU-China relations, my question is, are there any prospect of positive development in this regard, and how does your organization work on it despite China's pressure?
Yes, there are. I mean, it's a complex relations. There are many different aspects in the EU-China relations. There are 3 pillars: one economical pillar, one political pillar, one people-to-people relations. There are more than 30 dialogues in all sectors on all issues. So human rights is a small piece of it. But we are normally, human rights should be at the center of its foreign policy. That's what the text, the Treaty of the EU says. But it's not the the situation yet. I think the trade and the economical interests are dominating the landscape. So it's difficult to push for more space for human rights. There has been some positive development. Let me list some of them. For instance, in 2013, when there was the first High Representative for Human Rights in EU, Mr. Lambrinidis, soon after he was nominated, he went to Tibet to visit different places in Lhasa and around Lhasa. He did report back on his mission. So I think he did a good job, but there was not much follow-up after that, not much outcome. That's a problem. There has been also, I think, more and more EU leaders are more and more now aware about Chinese real intention trying to influence our society. And there is now a wish also to protect European interest, in particular in some strategic sectors of this Chinese influence. And so we even hear now EU leaders saying that China is a systemic competitor. So this is a new expression showing that EU is not naive. But now there is a gap between what EU leaders say and what they do concretely, in terms of operational action. So and this is partly due to the fact that the EU is very divided also on China. Some are states some members of the 27 EU member states are closer to China, like Hungary, or in some countries in south of Europe because of economic interest than other countries. So it's not a unified group of countries. And China is very good at playing with this division amongst European states. But one very concrete example, and I think that's very positive, it's recently China has 4 Chinese leaders have been put on an EU sanction list because of their behavior in Xinjiang against Uyghur community. China reacted, putting a list of 10 Europeans, blacklisted. And I think this is a good step by the EU, and we hope, we push, we encourage now EU leaders and to go further and to also put Chinese leaders who are responsible of serious human rights abuses in Tibet on this list, or Inner Mongolia on this list. I think this should be extended. This is something we are pushing forward also. So this is, I think, encouraging step taken very recently.
So as you are aware that the United States of America passed a new law, Tibetan Policy and Support Act of 2020, which sent a huge message to Chinese government regarding the reincarnation of the current Dalai Lama. So my question is, how important do you think is it for the governments of the world to adopt such law?
I think this is crucial. This is very important for the issue of Tibet, for the future of Tibet. This is a very sensitive issue also. It's a spiritual issue. It's a very political issue. And I think that the United States Tibetan Policy and Support Act is sending a strong message saying that Chinese leaders who interfere in the recognition of the next Dalai Lama, if His Holiness decides to be reincarnated, then they will face, concrete counter measures, and they will have consequences. So ICT has been working on this issue of succession of His Holiness and of other also Rinpoche lamas for several years. We are also pushing European states to take a public stand on this issue. And so far, few countries have done so. The Netherlands was one of the first. Then there was also Belgium, Germany, and the EU. Now we would like also to encourage other European states to follow the same path and to really say it's up to Tibetan Buddhist community and His Holiness himself to decide what the future of the reincarnation system is, of the succession is, and there shouldn't be any interference of any states, and in particular of the Chinese state. So this is certainly one of a very important issue for the future of Tibet that our government should be very aware of, and I think more active also.
So before we end our discussion, I would like to ask you a question on middle way approach. As you know, the middle way approach proposed by His Holiness the 14th Dalai Lama is a win-win situation. So, sir, how important do you think is the role of middle way approach for the Tibetan cause?
I think the ICT has always supported the vision and of His Holiness the Dalai Lama and approach of His Holiness the Dalai Lama. So you know that Lodi Gyari, the former chief negotiator with China on the middle way approach and on the memorandum on genuine autonomy, was also part of ICT. We had very close, relation and connection to him, and with his vision also and his advices, we have tried to help as much as we can this process, because we think that dialogue in any crisis situation is the only way forward, and there must be, and as you said, it's a win-win situation. If the Chinese would respect the autonomy of Tibetans in their internal affairs, religious affairs, social affairs, environmental issues, they would also gain from that. And I think, and that's the idea. The dialogue process. There has been a resolution of the European Parliament about that issue, and I think that. What the Tibetans have expressed in their memorandum on genuine autonomy and the additional note that was produced afterwards are still very valid. It was rejected by China, but I read the text again 2 days ago, and this is everything that is there is pertinent, because it says we want the Chinese constitution and the national law on regional autonomy to be implemented. What exists, it exists in nature, in principle. It has to be now implemented. If it was really implemented, Tibetan would enjoy, their autonomy as they deserve it. So this is something we will certainly continue to push forward. There is the future of Tibet depends on, I think, also self-determination. They have the right, Tibetans, to self-determinate, but I think also on the basis of non-violence, dialogue, and to find a solution that Chinese leaders would need to implement. And I think that His Holiness Dalai Lama can be the person that could convince his people to accept such a solution agreement if it was to be reached at some point in the near future.
Okay, sir. Thank you so much for joining our program, sir. With this, we're going to end our discussion here. Thank you so much, sir.
Thank you. Have a nice day. Thank you for inviting me.